thank you for joining us this afternoon. Welcome new commissioners, and thank you for your commitment to this very important process. I'll now call this meeting to order. This is our second meeting of the Sonoma County Advisory Redistricting Commission. With the new commissioners, our group now consists of 19 members. There are a lot of us, which I think is a good thing because it broadens the perspective that each of us all bring to this process. That being said, there are 19 of us, a pretty sizable group, and we have a very important job to do. And the clock is also ticking on the task before us. Our agendas are tight and our meetings need to be productive, so I will do my best to keep us on task and on the rails. I think I'll start each meeting by grounding us in our mission and remind us that we do have a job to do. Also, because this is the first time the county has assembled a commission to oversee the redistricting process, all eyes will be on us. I know you all read the paper and folks are watching us right now. So like I tell my kids, be good. Lastly, throughout these meetings, I will regularly address the community for their input because community participation is the intent of the state law and the election code that establishes county redistricting. I will stop there and ask at this time, are there questions from commissioners about this afternoon's agenda? You could either speak up or raise your hand. I'll try to see hands raised.
So if we could, pardon me, if we could just pause for a moment and allow the Spanish interpreter to give her a brief announcement at the very beginning of the meeting, just so that people know how to change over to the Spanish channel. If we could do that real quick, that would be very much appreciated.
Perfect.
Muy buenas tardes, bienvenidos a la reunión. Esta reunión será interpretada al español simultáneamente. Para acceder al canal de interpretación, por favor, localice el icono de interpretación al pie de la página, que es un globo, y haga clic y después seleccione su canal español. También puede seleccionar Mute Original Audio para silenciar el audio original. Gracias. Adelante. Go ahead. Thank you.
And I'll just follow up with some Zoom instructions. If you would like to speak during public comment, please use the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen. When it is your turn to speak, a panelist will provide speaking access, and then you will receive a notification to unmute yourself. At that point, please unmute your microphone and proceed with your comment. After you have provided your comment, your speaking capabilities will be disabled or muted. Thank you.
I would also like to say that any comments made in Spanish will be interpreted into English, so English speakers will need to click on the interpretation icon and choose the English channel to hear the interpretation. Thank you.
Okay, are there questions from commissioners about this afternoon's agenda? Just questions about this agenda. All right, I do not see, I'm kind of limited here, but I'm looking through. If you could, Chris?
Thanks so much, Chair Sheffield. Just a simple question. I noticed in the materials for today's meeting that there were no minutes from the last meeting. And I don't recall if we discussed whether minutes will be taken or if there's any kind of a record that may help us refresh our prior discussions as we move forward.
That is a good question. I don't know if we had that discussion about minutes. County staff, Yvonne?
Yeah, so my name is Yvonne Chu. I'm with the county helping to manage this project. And we had discussed previously that this recording would serve as the minutes for this meeting. So we have a recording on the website, which I realize is a lot of content, but that's the thorough version of the minutes.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, other questions?
Chair Sheffield, this is Karen Weeks. I have a couple questions.
All right.
And I'm not sure if now is the right time to ask these, and if it's not, please let me know. One of my questions is, I was recently told that the boundaries that we will be recommending to the Board of Supervisors will also be the same as for the Sonoma County Board of Education districts, and wondered if that was true. The second question I had is if the agenda packets could be emailed to us rather than us going to the website. I think that would be a lot easier for some people. And then my third question had to do with if there were going to be, could there be additional meetings in each supervisorial district with draft maps? So those were my questions. Like I said, I'm not sure when to ask that kind of stuff, so
No, I think that's appropriate right now. I do not have the answers. Again, back to Yvonne.
So as far as I know, and I'll defer to probably Shalise at NDC, the county lines are going to be the county lines. I don't know how they're related at all to the Sonoma County Office of Education and their lines. As far as I know, they're different, at least in function. As far as the agenda packets, I'm happy to email that to you directly if that's helpful. It is posted on the website so that everyone, the commission and the public, has access to it at the same time. So that's the purpose of posting those items. And then as far as the additional meetings in the districts, I think that's something we can certainly explore. I don't know, I can't commit to anything right now, but certainly something we can keep on in the parking lot for discussion. Thank you.
Great.
And regarding, I can address that use of this map for other jurisdictions. I'm not aware of it being done by default, but I can tell you that that has been done in other jurisdictions where they have same overlapping boundaries and the same number of seats, where the jurisdiction will wait and see which map is adopted and see if that's the map they want to adopt. So that could possibly be the case.
All right, thank you. Other questions from commissioners? All right, I don't see any hands raised. Do we have members from the public joining us now? And maybe right now we'll just, allow briefly if there are comments. Again, we want inclusion as much as possible. So I guess I will put it out there to viewers, public who want to speak up only about the agenda, this afternoon's agenda.
So it looks like we do currently have one hand raised, Gina, and so I think we'll go ahead and unmute you. You'll get a pop-up window that basically asks for permission. So you'll go ahead and need to enable that once you receive that, and then you will be able to speak.
Okay. Hello, I'm just chiming in because I was just going to sit and watch, but to provide some information because of the question that Ms. Weeks asked. I'm the president of the Sonoma County Board of Education, the Area 1 trustee. The 5 trustee boundaries of the Sonoma County Board of Education pretty much do align with the 5 supervisorial districts. So yeah, we are pretty much anticipating that after you do your work, that's the boundaries that will align with our 5 County Office of Education trustees.
Great, thank you, Gina. I'm glad that you are on top of it and are an active participant, community member, and doing your job as well on the board. Thank you. Emily, were there other participants from the public with hands up?
I do not see any other hands currently raised.
Great. All right. Well, we will move on to agenda item number 2, County Administrator's Office updates. Any updates?
I think I pretty much covered them, but let me just introduce myself again. My name is Yvonne Shu, and I'm helping to manage the redistricting effort for the county. The focus of today's meeting, as the chair mentioned earlier, as well as the one on August 23rd, is to provide redistricting and mapping tools information to the public. It's a lot to cover in 90 minutes. So as Ed said, we'll try to be as efficient as possible with our time. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ed. Thanks.
Great. All right, moving on. Item number 3, new commission member introductions. New members, again, welcome. And for the public, anybody tuning in, you can view commissioner resumes on the county website under the 2021 redistricting. But real quick, let's meet our new members. We will start with Lindsay. Lindsay, do you want to take yourself off mute and introduce yourself?
It doesn't look like she's actually currently on.
See, okay. Well, then we will move on to Kirsten. Kirsten, would you like to take yourself off mute?
Sure. Hi, I'm Kirsten Lange. Happy to be here.
Great. And Mike, I saw Mike.
Yes, I'm Mike Martini. I too am happy and honored to be here and look forward to participating.
Great. And Rocio.
Hi, Rocio Rodriguez. Happy to be here with my peers today. Thanks.
Wow, it's not even a quarter after. We're moving on to item number 4, redistricting overview, input on communities of interest, mapping tools, and I'll turn this over to the county for staff presentation.
So I didn't get to introduce myself, but I'm also new to the commission.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Who did I'm so sorry. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, no worries. So Verónica Vences, and happy to be here. Gracias a todos por sintonizarnos. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Veronica. All right. That is everyone. Okay, now we'll turn it over to the county for item number 4.
Okay, I'll go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, can everyone see the PowerPoint?
Yep.
My name is Shalise Tilton. I'm a senior consultant with National Demographics. We've been serving cities, counties, school districts, special districts for over 40 years. Since the California Voting Rights Act came into effect, we've assisted 368 jurisdictions in creating their districts, and we're presently have nearly 200 clients that are going through the same process as Sonoma County. As the chair mentioned, we have a very tight timeline, and that is largely driven because of the delay in the census. So I want to focus on this slide because it's very important to know that we have this meeting and we have August 23rd before we get the census data, and then we start, our focus is actually looking at maps. These initial meetings are extremely important. And so it's, as the chair, thank you for reminding us of the focus of this commission is to identify communities of interest, because that's going to be the most important thing when we're drawing these maps. So we are really looking to get input during tonight's hearing and during August on how the map should be drawn. And we'll be providing an overview of those mapping tools to help the public in beginning to draw maps. The census data we should have had by now. We usually would have had it in April, and we won't get raw data until August 16th. We can use that raw data, but what has to happen after that is the California statewide database needs to zero out all of the state prisons and reassign those prisoners to their home locations. Once they've done that, and hopefully I'm going back to this slide for a minute. It just depends when they release that data. The way that the law reads, if they release it prior to September 16th, then there will be a 3-week mandated waiting period before we're allowed to draw a release or to release maps. If they release it between September 17th and October 16th, there's a 1-week waiting period. So all eyes are going to be on the California statewide database to see when they release their data. I'm hoping it's after September 16th because that only puts us into a 1-week waiting period. But it will be interesting to see. It will definitely be before October 16th. I can't promise, but I'm pretty sure. So we are planning to have the data by October 5th, and we can look at the data and see how the existing districts balance out to see if their population balanced or not. And then we will want to have the public make their final tweaks to their maps based on what the true population is, and be ready to look at maps on October 18th. During that time, so you can, as I mentioned, we only have this and one other meeting to get input on the composition of districts, and then we'll be launched into actually looking at data and then looking at maps on October 18th. And then we'll have workshops to look at those maps. The Board of Supervisors will have their first look at the maps on November 2nd. November 16th will be a third hearing for them to identify a preferred map. And then they'll need to adopt December 7th, because our deadline to adopt is December 15th. So they'll introduce their ordinance on December 7th and adopt on December 14th. We don't have a lot of wiggle room in this timeline, as you can see. So we need to stay on task and move forward with the map drawing process. There are laws that we must follow when we're drawing maps. There are the federal laws, which require equal population. And then, as I mentioned, California has added another layer on top of that. Once that equal population that we must use is the census data. And then California adjusts that to reassign prisoners to their home locations. Also, when we're drawing lines, we need to be mindful of the Federal Voting Rights Act, meaning we can't draw lines that would dilute the voting strength of our protected class groups. So for example, you can't draw a district that would intentionally pack all of our protected class citizens into one district so they virtually have no effect in any other district. The flip side of that is you can't split them into several districts so that they are diluted and so it dilutes their voting power. So you need to be mindful of that. Also, maps cannot be drawn solely based on race. So race can be a factor, but not the only guiding factor or the predominant factor when drawing maps. Instead, we'll be looking to column 2. This is criteria, and it's prioritized criteria that's outlined in the Fair Maps Act. The first is geographically contiguous, meaning that it has to be just one solid border for the entire, for a single district. It can be separated by waterways, but only if there's a way to get through the waterway, like a bridge or a regular ferry service. The second one is the one that's very important, the communities of interest. This is, we want to make sure that we keep neighborhoods together that have common interests, that we keep socioeconomic groups together that share common interests, as long as they are geographically concentrated enough to keep them in the same district. And then we need to respect the boundaries of existing cities and existing census designated places. So those are what you would typically define as your unincorporated cities. Easily identifiable boundaries, that typically means following streets, mountainways, waterways, anything you can describe. And then compactness, and compactness doesn't necessarily have to do with the shape so much as it does not bypassing one group of people to get to a distant group of people. And prohibited is drawing maps that favor or discriminate against a political party. Once we've met all these, the state requirements, both the federal and the state requirements, we can look at other traditional redistricting principles, such as minimizing those voters that will have their election years changed. So for example, if they are expecting to vote in 2022, if it's possible to minimize the amount of voters that are switched from a 2022 cycle to a 2024 cycle. When we're talking about respecting voters' choices and continuity in office, We're talking if we're able to meet all the criteria and present an option that doesn't pair incumbents for head-to-head contests, we will present that option. We can slightly underpopulate a district if we know there's future population growth in a particular area. However, it's only just by a small amount. So when we're speaking in terms of equal population, we're talking total people, and that includes citizens and non-citizens, and each district must have equal amount of people. However, there can be a 10% deviation between the least populated district and the greatest populated district. So if you know there's an area that's going to have future population growth and it's certain, then you could possibly underpopulate that district, but probably no more than 5%. And then another traditional principle, if it makes sense for this commission, is to preserve the core of the existing districts. Because we don't have the data, NDC is providing 2020 estimated total population. So we believe that the total population is going to be near 500,000. Each of the districts will have near 100,000 people, 99,954 people for each of the 5 districts. When we're looking at this particular graph here, you'll see citizen voting age population, and that's an important category. That's the category that the courts will look to see how well the districts have been drawn to not dilute the voting strength of your protected class citizens. So these are citizens, US citizens who are 18 years of age who reside within the county boundaries.
Shalice, can we pause for one moment? It looks like a commissioner has a hand up. I'm not sure if they need some clarification. Peter?
Appreciate it, Chair Sheffield. This might be a question for another time, but on the prior slide, getting to the, thank you very much, number 2 on the California criteria, the undivided neighborhoods and communities of interest. I wanted to just ask a technical question on that. Are we getting census data to help? How are we making sure that we're not dividing communities of interest unintentionally? Are we sort of relying on our community outreach work? Are we using census data? I want to make sure that we really respect that point. And I want to make sure that it's not on just our own individual knowledge where those communities of interest might be.
Thank you. And that's an excellent question. And I can answer it briefly, and then we'll get more into it as we go into the slides. But yes, we will be providing data. So you will have information on these socioeconomic various factors for the entire county. And you can zone in, and for example, if you were looking at language spoken at home, you could see which areas have the higher percentage of households that have a different language spoken at home other than English. You can also look at income levels, household income levels. You can look at households with children. You can look at those renters versus homeowners. So yes, we're providing all types of data and we can actually put it into map form for you. That will be a color-coded map that will show those areas that have the higher percentage of what particular socioeconomic category you're looking at. And then, as you mentioned, we're looking for public testimony, and we're looking for testimony from the commissioners and things that are of interest to the commissioners that you'd like us to explore and keep in mind when we're drawing the districts. So it is a combination of both of those.
Thank you.
And that's exactly why the Fair Maps Act requires, 4 public hearings and requests at least one of them be held before the maps, is so that we can get input on the composition of districts. So during these public hearings, we want to hear from the public and the commission. What is your neighborhood? What are the geographic boundaries of the neighborhood? Are there natural dividing lines, highways, roads, canals, hills that define that neighborhood? Keep in mind, it has to translate eventually to a map. So when we're hearing testimony, we want to hear street names. That's very helpful when we're getting testimony from areas that seem to they're a community that should be kept together for their fair and effective representation. And then we can also look to planning records. It's not as easy. We can look at different zoning. Some cities have neighborhoods defined, but on a county level, it's a little bit more difficult. Excuse me just a second. Sorry about that. And then beyond neighborhoods, there are other factors that bring a community together. Sometimes certain areas are impacted by county policies. Often we hear watershed areas, fire-prone areas, flooding areas, areas with particular social concerns, homelessness, those types of things will, maybe there's a shared characteristic of a community and they're not necessarily a neighborhood, but they could be impacted by county policies and want to be kept together in a community so that their voice is stronger. And then when we do define those communities, sometimes it may benefit them by be included within a single district, or maybe have multiple representation. Maybe things like the coastline, that may make sense to have more than one trustee area touch the coastline, or does it make sense for it to be in a single district? Keep in mind, when we're talking about communities of interest, we need to know if they'll benefit from being in a single district for their effective and fair representation. So we have different tools that are available for the public to use at all different levels. Everything from just simple review maps, get to know your neighborhoods. Some of those maps are going to provide data of our different concentration, of the different characteristics of our community. And then we have a simple draw your neighborhood tool. We have paper-based and Excel-based maps for those who are not comfortable with computers. And then we have the most powerful draw map tool. And I'm going to quickly go over those tools, but keep in mind that it doesn't matter how maps are submitted. One could use a cocktail napkin and draw a map and submit it. Once maps are submitted, NDC will produce all maps in the same manner. With each map, there's going to be a set of demographic data that will be accompanying each map. And maps are typically numbered, so they don't have the name of who submitted them, and all are treated equally, even those maps that are not legally compliant. And what I mean by that is sometimes someone will draw districts that are not geographically contiguous, or they'll have the wrong number of districts, or they want to just simply draw one district and not have to draw all 5 districts out. We love that too, because that helps to tell the commission, it tells a story to the commission. This is what if someone is very familiar with their own district, but not their own area, they may want to draw just one district, and we will produce that map for the commission. Typically, what will happen once the maps get submitted is the commission will like maybe a couple districts from one map and maybe 3 districts from a second map, and we'll combine those districts. Story map is one of the tools that helps to define the neighborhoods. And all of these tools are now live on the website. The last page of my slide has the website address for you. It is it is sonomacounty.ca.gov/redistricting. But the story map is just a viewer that has various types of data. I think we have water districts, some school districts. We have the various cities and the census designated places. We have the existing supervisorial districts. It works similar to a PowerPoint, but you just simply scroll through and the map's populated. And you can click on which ones you want to see. We have an interactive review map, and this interactive review map will be very helpful when you're using the paper maps as well. You can activate what the current districts look like or deactivate what the current districts look like. Also, you can activate, and I have activated here, what the particular cities are within the cities and census designated places. You can see those outlined in red. And what happens once the maps start getting submitted, they'll be populated on here too. So you can see different map submissions, even overlay one over the other, so you can analyze the difference between two maps. This is just a review tool. You cannot draw using this particular tool, but you'll find it'll be very helpful. And you can use this in conjunction with the paper maps. The paper maps are maps that have the population identified by population unit. Population units are created by NDC. They're not official census term, but they typically are following census blocks. So, and census blocks and census tracts. In most cases, they're census tracts. So you can see that the screen is very small, but we give the population of that particular census tract. So if someone wants to draw their own map, they can just use a marker and just do a heavy outline of each of the districts, and then use a calculator and add up to see if they've gotten close to that 99,900 people per each of their districts. If you're familiar with Excel, it's probably not worth teaching yourself Excel if you don't know it, but if you're familiar with Excel, once you've drawn your map, you can have Excel. We have an Excel spreadsheet that will do the math for you. And what you're seeing in the right-hand side of your screen, instead of it showing the total population, all these population units are now numbered 1 through, I think it's 1 through 80. And so, for example, if your district's 1 through 30, we're in your district number 2, you would just go to the spreadsheet, find those population units 1 through 30 and assign it to district 2, and then look at your results tab, and it will show you how you're doing as far as population balance, and also your percentage of your citizen voting age population by race and ethnicity. District R is a simple paintbrush tool. It's not as precise as the next tool I'll be showing you, which is the more sophisticated tool. But this one allows you to simply, you take a paintbrush and you draw in your map. So you paint over the census blocks. One thing I want to caution you about when you're using the maps is that the smallest geographical unit that we can use is a census block. So when you're drawing your map, especially with the county with a lot of unincorporated areas, there are some very odd shaped, larger census blocks. So don't be frustrated when you're drawing your line right here and everything's colored up here, because it's all one census block. That works, that holds true for all the tools. But I just want you to know that sometimes it gets frustrating. You're saying, I'm only doing exactly around here, but it's got some jut outs because that's the census block geography that it's following. This tool is great because you can either just draw your own very specific neighborhood, or you can build out all 5 districts. It's your choice. And then you just put the tag Sonoma County on it. There's instructions on it when you go in, and it will be shared with us at NDC, and others will be able to see it as well. And then we have the most powerful tool, which is the Calipers Maptitude Online for Redistricting. The Caliper tool allows you to either take the existing districts and tweak them, or start completely from scratch. This is this will give you all types of data by virtually every category that we can provide, that we provide normally in our demographic summaries. But this is a great tool because you can zoom in very closely to the census blocks and pick up one census block at a time. And then here is your website, sonomacounty.ca.gov/redistricting. At the next meeting, we're going to have very specific, we're going to get more into showing you how the tools work. In the meantime, I would encourage each of you to go to the website and start playing around with the tools. Get your list of questions for me. There's video on the website that will help to guide you. You can watch the short videos for each of the district R and the caliper, and just start playing around and drawing maps. Excuse me. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about the tools. And again, as one of the main purposes of these public hearings is to get input on the composition of districts. When I go back to this slide, the center column, those prioritized criteria, the items 1, 3, 4, and 5 are pretty easy to grasp. It's pretty easy to identify when a map is not geographically contiguous. It's pretty easy to identify if cities or census designated places are split up. Easily identifiable boundaries, compactness, that's not quite as easy, but it's pretty straightforward. The thing that's not straightforward is the communities of interest. And this is going to be the one that we're going to be hearing most from the public. And this is the one, if someone were to ever challenge your map, we would want to be able to say, this is what we heard from the public. This is the testimony received from the public. And when folks submit maps, we're asking them, please, to identify, give us just a quick summary of why you drew the map the way you drew it. I know at the last meeting, we got some good feedback from the commissioners. One of the feedbacks was, this is a great example of what we'll be looking for at these public hearings. One of the feedbacks that we heard was, okay, in the existing map, Roanoke Park is in 2 districts. Is there a way that we can draw a map that would keep it whole in 1 district? There was also feedback that the coastline was completely served by 1 district. But does it make sense to have multiple districts touch the coastline? Another feedback that we heard was that one of the districts, I think it's District 3, is entirely made up of incorporated cities when the other districts only have about 30% incorporated cities. And is there a way to draw a map that has more even distribution? These are the types of things that we want to hear from you as commissioners. And this is what we want your focus to be on, so that when we have maps, we can explain why the maps were drawn the way that they were drawn. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions about the mapping tools or anything else.
Questions from commissioners? I'm not seeing hands raised.
And there's a few
You got
hands.
4.
Oh, okay. I don't know why I'm not seeing hands raised, but let's just
It's the little icons. They have their icon.
right. I'm not seeing the icons, but that's okay. We'll
Ana Lugo, Ana Horta, Rocio Rodriguez, and Chris Moore.
all right, let's go with you, Ana Lugo.
Thank you, Chair Sheffield. I understand we want to get to the substance of the maps. However, I think we still haven't truly understood or been fully briefed on the actual process. And so I'm looking at your timeline. I actually want to go back to your timeline. If you want to pull up the slide, that's totally okay. I want to look at the second slide with your timeline. And so December 15th is pointed out as a statute mandated date for submitting maps. However, I am also looking at other jurisdictions, the state of California itself, San Francisco, whose redistricting process is going into 2022. San Francisco's is going into April 2022. California is going at least into February of 2022. And so what I get concerned about and curious about is, one, I'm curious about where is this statute? Is it local? Is it federal? Is it state? The second one is I don't we continue to talk about, we only have a few meetings left. I'm counting the meetings. I'm seeing how many meetings. The process that you're taking us through it so fast and so surface level that I'm just really concerned about being able to fully execute the mandate that we were given by the board. If this timeline is what is, and is it artificially created, or is there an actual statute? So I'd love some clarity on all of it.
Yes, I can answer that. So those with June elections have to adopt by December 15th. Those have elections in November, their adoption date is April 17th. The state is getting relief because theirs is guided by the Constitution. So a judge is able to provide relief to the state. The legislature, it is a California statute. It's in the election code. It begins with election code 21500 if you want to read the Fair Maps Act. So that has all the deadlines. It would take the state legislature to change this date. And I can tell you that they get much pressure from the registrar of voters to keep the dates as they are. I don't know of any pending legislation to change them. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, I think I understood. So just for clarity's sake, you're saying that because we have an election in June of 2022, we have to do it by December. And other jurisdictions, perhaps San Francisco, they may not have an election in June, so they can delay their process into 2022.
Yeah, I can't speak directly for San Francisco. They have a separate, they have separate legislation that guides their process.
If I may, through the chair, this is Robert Pittman, County Counsel. San Francisco is a charter county. They are not bound by the state statute. So they do have different rules when it comes to that. Unfortunately, the reason this process is so abbreviated is there was a huge delay in getting the census numbers this year. They have not adjusted the deadlines for adopting it. Census numbers are generally come out at the end of March. We're not going to get them till the end of September. That's why this process is so abbreviated.
Anna, does that answer your questions?
Yes, thank you, Chair, Ms. Stilton and Mr. Pittman. I just want to add for the record that I do believe that the level of abbreviation of this timeline, I understand we have to do it by December 15, totally okay. The other level of abbreviation of the timeline by the county, I don't know that it fully allows us to do the job that we were asked to do.
All right, Anna Horta, I still can't see hands raised, but for some reason I'm having problems on my end, but I believe Anna, you had a question?
Yeah, so I believe, Shell, as you said, that you're gonna use population units for the physical maps. I think that you were talking about that.
Just for the paper maps.
Okay, and you did say that those are created by NDC, is that correct?
Mm-hmm. So they typically follow census tracts.
Okay, will it be possible to share, I know we have very limited time, but to share the methodology of those population units, how they were created with us through an email or something?
I can tell you the simple answer is most follow census tracts. You'll be able to look at the interactive map viewer and be able to zoom in and see census blocks that underlie those tracts. So when you're drawing this map, if you don't like the way these population units are drawn, if you're using the paper map, you can just make a note of which streets you're using or which or a snapshot from the interactive map viewer of where you're drawing the line. Some of them are drawn so that we don't have a problem with geographic continuity, but most are just follow the track maps.
Okay, thank you.
And the next person that has their hand raised is Rocio.
Hi, thanks. So a couple of things. I noticed that in the map for the story map, it still mentions the County of Santa Barbara. So just to fix that, please. And then another comment was if we could also have a legend for the coding of the data in, if possible, for the interactive review map. When we click on it, it gives us still the data coding, and it's kind of hard to decipher what is what. I want to see, is that possible?
Let me check on that.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks. And then I wanted to clarify the data that you were commenting on before. Is that what we can also gather here, or are there additional information that you'll be giving us separately, or is everything accessible through the Excel sheets and through this review map?
Through story map will be the demographic data. And if there's additional data that you'd like to see, we can put that on there as well.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. It looks like Chris Bohr.
Thank you very much. Shalise, if you could go back to slide 2 and 3, I wanted to point out something about our schedule. Perfect. So I think we all, understand that the census data won't be coming out as nearly as soon as we would like, that's coming out mid-August. And then you've done a very good job describing that needs to happen before it's in a workable form that we can actually use. But if that work takes 4 to 6 weeks, as listed here, that means the data at the soonest may not be available until September 16, or at 6 weeks, that's like September 30th. And I'm becoming very concerned about the time the public will have from when that data is finally ready until that October 8th deadline. I think maybe 3 weeks under the best case scenario. I think that's suboptimal, but tight and perhaps acceptable. I'm very uncomfortable if the data doesn't come out till late September, that we give the public really only 1 week to respond here.
We would like to give them more. Believe me, we would like to give them more.
Is there something we can look at in terms of alternate scheduling, maybe combining workshops within the same week that may follow later on, for example, or some other creative scheduling to give the public more time here?
What we can possibly do is still keep that deadline. Keep in mind that we'll be providing, those tools are available now with the estimated population data. So they can draw their maps now, tweak them, and then submit them. Even if they choose not to tweak them, they can still submit them. They may not be population balanced, but it may not take much for us to be able to adjust them for them. What we could do is we could add a second deadline for the public to submit maps. It's just going to make your job harder. I would like to keep that October 8th so we have something we can start working with. It isn't until you actually get those draft maps that you get really some rich public engagement, because they can actually see something tangible and identify this map works, this part of this map doesn't work. And until you actually get those maps in hand, it's very difficult. I would encourage you to keep this early deadline, but perhaps allow the public to still submit maps beyond that. That deadline guarantees it's going to be discussed on the 18th, and we could perhaps soften the deadline and allow maps to still come in and be introduced.
I very much appreciate your thoughts there. At the end of the day, from my point of view, I think we want to give the public every opportunity to participate. And if that means shortening the time frame that we as a committee have to buck up and get the work done, I think that's a reasonable trade-off to give the public their voice, and we lean in and do a little bit more concentrated work within a shorter period than perhaps proposed. Those are my thoughts.
We could make this date be the October 22nd date, October 18th, 22nd would give them 4 more days.
I think that's definitely something that we can consider, Chris. I hear exactly what you're saying, just a little bit more time for the public. And if that means more work on our end, hey, you know, we're building that into the process. I think that's definitely something that we should consider. Other questions? I think Socorro, you had your hand up and then down, but back up again. And then it looks like Kirsten and Mike. Socorro, you want to go first?
Sure, thank you. So when I look at the slide 2, so today is noted to receive public input. And I'm just curious, is public here? Will we receive how do we receive input? Is it only if people speak in the meeting, if they send in emails, where does that go? How do we keep hearing from the public? That's kind of on this side, but then on the other side, if this is being noted as a date to collect input, how does the community know what they can give input to? And has that happened? And it felt weird to see this as a public input date when I haven't seen a lot go out about it. So I'm just curious kind of how that would happen. And then I have a second question just to sub. Is there, since this happens every 10 years, correct? Is there, when it last happened, were there communities who shared, discomfort or pain points about the way it was drawn previously that communities of interest have already been dissected? Do we have a history of communities who have had some pushback on the way the boundaries are drawn? That might be helpful, kind of working backwards as well with what we have to know where existing problems exist. Is there any historical information on that? That's my last question. Thank you.
I think we can have the county speak to the public outreach portion of your question on how the community knows to provide input. But you're exactly right. We get input from a number of different ways, from the comments that are received through the internet, through social media, through this public forum, submitted in writing by email to the county, and we'll compile them all in one spot if they relate to composition of the districts. And then today, after I'm finished answering these questions, what I really hope to hear from the commissioners is a focus on just identifying communities, identifying what you want to see in the maps. That's going to be very useful for us. As far as history, I think that that's going to be addressed. It was a very different process that took place 10 years ago. And as with most counties, I believe that it was just handled by an in-house committee, although I'll have to ask the county to speak to that.
So yeah, that's true. I'll just interject. I sent a follow-up email after that first meeting, and if you'd like me to resend it, I'm happy to do so, but it included a summary of what happened in 2011. So you can see how this process this time around is a lot different from before, and it was actually comprised of an internal group, county internal group that drew the lines last time. So there have been a lot of changes since then.
I'm just wondering about community feedback on burdens already experienced by the existing boundaries. So not necessarily the process, but just have people already spoken up like this is a problem from that last time. And I still don't understand from the collection of the information to how we hear about it. Will we only be updated in meetings? I don't know how we're supposed to be kept abreast of the public input. Are we only given somebody's analysis of it? Do we see all of it wrong?
We can start to share, we can have a shared document, a Google document that's keeping a summary of the comments. Right now, we don't have a lot of comments. We're looking to hear comments from this commission about the composition of districts so that we can add to that list. I virtually mentioned the 3 that we have. So I'm happy to continue that list, and we could perhaps, I can work with Yvonne on the best way to do that. If there's a Google Sheet we want to share, or I don't know what is the, I'll work with the county on the best way to get that running list out to you.
And I'd like to make a request to get the demographics of the input we're getting, like where it's coming from, to the best extent we can. I mean, I'll be here for our meeting, so I know our conversation, but what I'm not clear on is how we know the community's conversation that they're maybe having with other people that aren't us during this meeting. If today is a public input day, for example, and we have none, I want to know, we like n equals 0 for public input. I want to know that. Thank you.
Okay, Kirsten, you had a hand up?
Sure, I have a couple questions, some that Socorro has addressed, but I will emphasize in the particulars that I'm interested in. One being, it was noted that the demographic data that we will be given as a preliminary would follow census tracks. What are the metrics to measure for the disasters that we've experienced with fires and flooding in the various communities? How will that be accounted for in projections, so that we have the closest to accurate or relevant necessary information to identify these things? My second question will be, with as far as public input, yes, this meeting is a public hearing meeting, but I'm going to be nitpicky. The social media push and community push was pretty minimal. Both posts on the county's platforms did not go out until July 22nd. Facebook having 4 likes and 2 shares, and the same shares on those organizations from the same 2 likes on Instagram. You only get the emails if you opt into the emails, but it doesn't account for people who do not have access or strong Wi-Fi. We know that's an issue. We've seen it in how distance learning rolled out. So for this next meeting, you know, how can we be, or the county be, a little bit more strategic and forward with the push out so folks can receive the information, knowing that not everyone is using social media and platforms. And I don't know that the messaging really leans people in to understand or to know what to ask based on the language that it's put forward. I don't know that it's helping people recognize what this process is for. And I say that because it's very clear that the statewide campaign is very communicative and people are engaging in that direction because it's clear why they should be invested in those areas. So just something to explore if we really are looking to harness public input. I will do my best to reach out to folks, but I know I don't work for the county. So that's the piece. And then the third question is, will we be able, can we just add it to record to just get the previous maps that exist and what was diagrammed? And can that be sent out, you know, timely so that we have time to review and lead these into the conversations that we need to have with people to engage in this process? And I think to the point made earlier, I think by Karen, was to have the packet go out early so then we can prepare for the meeting to get the folks here. It's a little hard. I think we all manage multiple things in the world outside of this. So to be able to come prepared, have the back end knowledge so that we can be as effective as it's been emphasized multiple times that we have a short time frame, I think giving us all the necessary tools to be successful, knowing that it's a short time frame would be pertinent. And to the point brought up earlier by Chris, I think it is true. I would much rather have one more opportunity to work a little harder and smarter and strategically to get public engaged in this conversation so that we, and it means that we're far more productive in these sessions together.
I just point of clarification, then I'll have Emily address the public outreach, which I think actually is going to be a separate item on tonight's agenda after we talk about composition of districts. I just wanted to clarify, and I probably misspoke. When we're talking that the maps are based on census tracts, that is only for the paper kit. We would love to be able to provide the paper kit showing the population of each census block, but it would make a map that would be unreadable. So it's only if you're using the paper map that what we've assisted for you is we've outlined census tracts and provided the population data. And you're not even bound to use those track lines. If you don't like those census tracts, you can draw a line through it and we'll figure out the population for you of where but that's only for the paper maps. The rest you're going to be able to get down to the smallest geographical unit available, which is a census block. So you'll be able to use the census blocks. And then as far as accounting, as far as projections, I'm not sure you're talking about population projections because of the displacement from the fires and other disasters. If that is the case, then unfortunately, we're bound to use the official census data. So we cannot deviate, even if we know a whole area was evacuated for the month of April and nobody responded to the census, we still are bound to use that official California statewide database adjusted data. So whatever the California statewide database provides, we must use. And then when you mentioned previous maps, are you talking the existing supervisorial districts, or were you talking previous
to that?
Going back
before that, just for context. I like a lot of information. I don't know about everybody else.
Okay, I'm gonna have to defer to the county. So you're talking prior to
10 years prior to the 10 years ago, 20 years ago, what did it look like? Who was here? Who lived where? Because I think what I understand this process to be is to both set up and project where folks are moving about and how to best come up with the lines that service those regions. But although I've been here a while, there's a lot I still don't know. And I would love to know as a visual picture, what happened before the lines existed now, just so that if I recommend something that perhaps didn't work in its current model, I have that insight and I'm not put in a position to be shot down by whatever constituency, noting that maybe this has already happened here and it didn't work.
Yeah, Yvonne, I'll have to defer to you if those maps exist, if there's.
Shouldn't they be like government record?
I
would have to look into it. I mean, the ones from 10 years ago, I know are locatable. 20 years ago, I have not looked that far back.
If there's a library I can be directed to, I'm happy to go to it. I just would like to know where the information lives. I would hope it's kept somewhere to be able to, fill in my mind as I approach this process, as I'm being asked to be effective and work quickly with my peers.
And then for the outreach, Chair, do you want to hold that until we have the item on the outreach?
Yeah, we'll just bring it up on the correct agenda item. And these are great questions, great suggestions. And again, commissioners know that this is a new process. The county's never undertaken having a commission do this process before. The information that is requested on some of these, I'm hoping that it can be provided. Maybe it can be provided, via email before. Obviously, we want to have it before our next meeting. Keep making these requests, and I'm sure the county will do its best to provide the information that's being asked. There are other hands. Mike, your hand has been up for a while. Mike.
So real quickly, through the chair, and I don't want to drag this out too long, but for council, two questions. The first one, I apologize, this is my first meeting. Is there any prohibition for the commissioners to go out and speak with and listen to community groups outside of these hearings? And then the second question for council as well is when you go back to page 4, you have redistricting rules and goals. I fully understand federal laws you need to comply with. You've got California criteria for counties. How stringent are those? But most importantly, the other traditional redistricting principles, are they ironclad, or are you allowed a certain amount of latitude on that third column? Those are my questions.
I've got 2 of 3.
No, there was only 2.
Okay. As far as the rules, those are ironclad. Everything has to comply with both state and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 on a federal level. How you interpret those sometimes has a little bit of latitude, but they are regulations and guidelines that we have to adhere to. For example, where there's flexibility, they will say to the extent practicable. So the statute has built-in flexibility for you. So for example, we're not supposed to divide communities to the extent practicable. Currently, we divide the city of Santa Rosa into 4 supervisorial districts. The only one that doesn't touch a portion of Santa Rosa is District 2. That was done trying to even up the population and to ensure that we could get there. It's highly unlikely that we can ever not divide portions of Santa Rosa. So then you look at smaller communities within there when you're making your decision. So I hope that answers the question. And would you please repeat the first question?
But just real quickly on that, again, just the difference between other traditional redistricting principles, because one of those is to respect voices, minimize voters shifted to different election years. If that's ironclad, you've got to stick with 1, 3, and 5, and 2 and 4, and just tweaking those. But if that's more flexible, that's an issue. And how strict is the column 3?
That one is a little more flexible. It's to the extent feasible, and they understand in adjusting populations, although I think we're talking about a little bit more in at least in the opening comments than just adjusting population shifts, which is generally fairly benign and a minimum number of people shift.
And then the other question was just simply, is there any prohibition from commissioners going out and meeting with community groups outside of these hearings?
No, as long as you share it with your fellow members so that everyone is coming from the same starting point or has all the same information, that is perfectly acceptable. Part of the reason we did the advisory body was so that we could reach out to the community, which the board doesn't always have the ability to do in greater context. This is certainly, this is going to set us for the next 10 years. So we'd like to, as large a voice from the community as we possibly can.
Thank you.
Robert, how would we share that information with commissioners, or Yvonne, if you know, what's the best way? Is it something we bring to a meeting? Is it something that we do via email? We want to be transparent, of course.
Share what information you
The
want?
information that if we're going to, as Mike had pointed out, if we're going to seek out on our own individually from folks in the community.
So you may see this if you watch our board meetings or our planning commission meetings regularly. We always ask them to give us disclosures before we deal with a land use item. It's, did you meet with the applicant? Did you meet with any neighbors? What information did they provide you? Is it something you're going to rely on? Just so it can all be here. The other way to do that is to filter or funnel all information you get through Yvonne and Crystal so that they can make sure it's distributed to the entire body before we have a meeting.
Perfect. Okay, Karen Weeks, you have your hand up.
Thanks. I just wanted to throw my voice in to, if I'm in agreement with having an extra meeting for more community participation. So I just wanted to make that statement. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Elizabeth?
Yeah, just a follow up on the comment. Somebody requested information about prior maps. So just from my prior life working in the elections office, you may, for the staff, you may want to contact the current registrar of voters, because that position was one of the required committee members on prior redistricting committees. They should have record of prior maps. I believe I saw an attachment of the packet that went out from 2011 that had some of the proposed maps that went to the board. Prior to that, there should be some record of maps. There may also be meeting minutes from committee meetings. There were public meetings. So those from 2011 might be within the county administrator's office, because I believe that committee reported to that department in 2011. So there may be some record of minutes from that prior redistricting. Prior to that, I can't be sure, but I'm pretty sure they'll have records of prior maps and any proposed maps they may have done.
I definitely have access to the 2011 information. It's the 2001 that I am not sure. So thank you though.
Okay, Cynthia Murray has her hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering, in other places, other times, staff makes a recommendation about different options the committee could have. Are we going to get staff recommendations on mapping?
You guys are making the recommendations. This is not, I'm facilitating and kind of like project managing, but the recommendations are coming from the commission.
I understand that we are to make recommendations, but generally we get a staff report with what the options are and why certain choices might have been advantageous one over the other, analyzing the data, and then we choose amongst ourselves what's the best recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. But so there's not going to be any staff analysis of the data. Correct?
That's my understanding. I think it's NDC will bring the information to us and present it to us, and then I say us, but I mean you, as the commission will then deliberate and make those decisions.
And I can speak a little to that as well. Typically, what we'll do is we will, if we get many maps, say you get 30 maps, we will usually group them together. So we'll have definitely several maps will share similar characteristics, and we'll point those out and what the map submitter was trying to accomplish and the map submitter comments. So you'll be able to look at that. This is what the map submitter had in mind when they draw that. So it will all be presented in report form along with the maps.
Thank you.
All right, Ana Horta.
I just want to make a point. It seems that a lot of us are feeling that we don't have enough information nor enough time to make any kind of recommendations. So if we can please have some more information and background. I mean, if I'm feeling confused, I cannot imagine how confused the public is. So I feel we need more clarity, and we're happy to take on the work because we want to serve right and well. And like if you're going to be sending us materials that we can use to talk to our community, I know you sent a flyer in the email, but the flyer is only in English. So please be mindful of that. I didn't see the flyer in Spanish, at least myself.
We have a Spanish flyer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, just those kind of things. It would be really helpful to have, everything together and more information, please. Thank you.
One thing that I would highly suggest that each of you do is go to the website, and there at the bottom, you scroll down on the redistricting page. There's some excellent resources, and I think there's one that is really well done. And it was created by MALDEF, by NAACP and the Asian Justice Center combined. And they've done such a great job at talking about local redistricting. And I think that would really benefit this commission to read that. It's the first one that's listed under, they're all good, but this one I thought was particularly well done and comprehensive, that will help you, because if you are absolutely right, Commissioner or Vice Chair, this is such a compressed timeline. It's nearly impossible to get you up to speed with all the intricacies of redistricting in the short amount of time we have to do it in. I can tell you in past times you would have had since April, you have been working on this since April. So I completely understand your frustration. That resource I think will really be helpful. And as much as you can push that out to the community for those who are very much interested, that would be a good place to point them to as well.
Okay, Ana Lugo.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Vice Chair, for bringing up your last point and amplifying it. I think that many of us have been saying similar things, and I think to Commissioner Boer's point, the commissioners can do the work. I think we just need to be equipped to do it. And I also think there are some assumptions going on, so I could like for the chair to at some point address that. at least for speaking for myself, I really want to do a good job for the entire community. And I want to make sure that we are taking into account every single marker that can make this maps fair for everyone, and that we're also making sure that we're doing an equity-driven process. And I think where I continue to be concerned is where the county isn't actually instructing us how this is going to be an equity-driven process, or perhaps it isn't going to be an equity-driven process, and we need to get really clear about that. And I love that there are resources on the website. It could have been wonderful to be sent an email 3 weeks ago with resources and materials so that we could properly prepare for this meeting, given the limited amount of time we have. And so it could be wonderful to get an email with resources, whatever those are that are going to allow us to do our job to the best of our ability. And then I also have one last question, which is I continue to hear this assumption, and perhaps I was in my reading of my job as a commissioner, I missed this, which is that we are outreach navigators for this process. And so if we are, will we be compensated, and keeping in mind equity in this conversation? If we're expected to be outreach navigators, some of us have full-time jobs plus many other jobs, will we be compensated for the outreach that we're going to do on behalf of the county? I'd love to understand that better.
Well, I do hope that this is an equity-driven process. It looks like Socorro has her hand up. She had mentioned in some comments about the county's Office of Equity. I don't know if this is what you'd like to bring up at this time, Socorro.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. That's just what I was going to mention. I know that it's been a big priority and pillar for the county to be equity centered in all of their work. I know they created the Office of Equity, and I was wondering if we'd get recommendations from them. And to Anna's point about being centered, I just quickly was able to go through the resource you recommended, and there's some data it recommends to be able to protect, like voting patterns and of the minority, majority, and things like that, information on past election of minority candidates in areas. Will we have that type of information as we think about how this goes and think about areas that are vulnerable? It seems to be important information that they're advocating we have. Will we have to ask for those? Or again, if it's equity centered, will we be given that so that we can, as other people said, be very well prepared and serve in the best way possible? Thank you.
I will get you a complete demographic summary of the existing districts as they are today. And then when maps come in, yes, you will have that voting patterns for each of the maps that come in for each of the districts drawn in the maps. So once you have a tangible map, you'll be able to see all of the data that's with it and be able to analyze those maps. But to give you an idea of what it's going to look like, I'll get you one for the existing districts and the voting patterns for the existing districts and all the socioeconomic data for the existing districts, which are as they are today and not, not necessarily the map you're going to be ending up with. Yes.
And I think because it's come up a couple of times already this afternoon, maybe moving forward, we can work with county staff to have information sent to us directly via email, plenty of time in advance, as it is also being posted on the redistricting website as well. Just a simple request.
Yep, no, I appreciate that. And the challenge for me is obviously that, we get the data or the information that we want to share, and then we do want to have it available in Spanish and posted on the website. So if, I'll see what I can do to kind of rev that up, but it's just kind of.
And for commissioners, please be patient. Obviously we understand we're trying to do everything we can in the short timeline that we're operating under. Anna, I see your hand up, and then we want to go to public because I think there's somebody who's been waiting, a member of the community waiting to ask as well. Anna Lugo.
Yes, and Yvonne, I totally appreciate the amount of human power that this takes. And so the other part to this is, how do we support you? And is that going back to our supervisors who we were appointed by and saying there needs to be more staff resources, right? Because we want to do our job so that they can do their job. And we want you to do your job and be supported in your job so that we can do our job. So I think that the I can't, or there aren't enough resources, is not in my vocabulary. We need to figure out what's the solution. And is the solution me going to the supervisor who appointed me and saying, hey, this is the feedback I have, right? So I'd really would love to figure out what supports does the staff need to be able to support us in doing our job so that the supervisors can do their job.
Well, I appreciate that, Anna. And, you know, this is, you know, a new process, obviously, for the county. And so we're just like revving up. And so I think once we get like the, you know, like kind of like that rhythm going, it's gonna be a little cramped in October, but, you know, we had to hold off on some of the communications, mainly because the whole commission hadn't been seated until last week. So, you know, there's a little bit of like a timing issue with that, but yes, I understand the need to have information as soon as possible. And believe me, I am with you on that one. So, you know, feel free to email me separately or reach out to me separately. We can have, you know, additional conversations about this, but yes, I understand the need to get that information to you as soon as possible.
Okay, we're going to do a time check. It's 5:20 right now. Looks like we have a question from the community. Public comment.
Yes, so we have Deborah McKay, and they should now be able to speak.
Hi, this is Deborah McKay, and I have a couple of comments. I want to let you know that the Sonoma County Library recently did an inventory of all the materials that are in the Sonoma County Archives, and that might be a place to find previous redistricting efforts. So you might contact the Sonoma County Library to find out if they have a record of those previous documents. So that's how you might get documents before the 2011 redistricting. My other comment is, it seems like there's an approach of having the community come to you. And I realize you're in a tight time frame, but as much as you can go out to the community, and I think that's part of why there was an advisory committee appointed, was the idea that you could be ambassadors. So I really would like you to explore how you can be ambassadors to the community, because this only happens once every 10 years. And a lot of people couldn't even vote, you know, 10 years ago, or weren't living in this community, and you're using an entirely different process too than was used in the past. So I think the community is pretty unfamiliar with what you're trying to do here, and they aren't going to know how to access you. And also, if your primary way of the community accessing you is to come and talk at your committee meetings, you need to let the public have input quicker than an hour and a half into your meeting. Because most people are not going to wade through your meeting. I mean, I personally am very interested in what you're doing, but most members of the public have so many other things competing for their time that if you make them wait an hour and a half to talk to you, they're just not going to do it. So I think you need to really kind of rethink and re-examine how you're going to gather public input if you really want a robust community conversation about this. And I especially like the idea that Karen Weeks put forward of maybe kind of taking this on the road, but going and holding meetings in each district. You know, if there's a way to do that in person rather than just Zoom. A lot of the community is still not familiar with Zoom or doesn't have the bandwidth to do that. So I wouldn't rely on just this Zoom format for gathering your community input. I think you're going to have to become more creative than that if you really want to reach, you know, the segments of the community that historically have not been represented and not been included. So I think it's worth your time to really examine and study how you can really engage the public in this process. But I commend what you're doing. I know this is new, you're feeling your way, and you have an incredibly short timeline. So you've got a really hard job in front of you, and I commend you on being willing to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. As I stated before, I will do my best to allow public comment. I think for these meetings, we'll have public comment allowed on every agenda item. Are there other members of the community who would like to speak?
There are no other hands raised at this time, but I do see we have a couple more ARC members who do have their hands raised, Peter and Raymond.
Great. Let's go, Peter.
I appreciate that. I really appreciate Deborah's comments as well, a member of the public who just spoke, and I think it's tapping into the theme that a lot of the commissioners are raising today, and kind of getting back to a question that I had last meeting as well about outreach. We might be on item 6 at this point, and it might be helpful to kind of go through a public outreach update as well, because I was actually expecting to do a lot of outreach sort of on my own and in partnership with other commissioners and through our various networks and groups that we are a part of, whatever those might be, knowing that that's probably insufficient in itself, but it's a start. But I'm not clear that that's actually the intent. And so I really want to get a handle on how I'm going to do, and this is what everybody's saying before, right? So I'm just adding my voice on how I'm going to actually carry out this work, because I don't think it is just like waiting for the public to show up at Zoom based on a flyer. I think it's something different than that. And then we're, again, each going to have our own access and understanding of various communities, and just hoping that we would sort of leverage those and bring them back collectively so we can all learn from each other, because we're not familiar with every single community throughout the county. So I'm just echoing that and maybe suggesting that we focus more on the outreach presentation to maybe hopefully see that reflected in what the plan is, hopefully.
I can just I can just follow on with what Peter said, because I think I feel like we've been wanting to move on to number 6, and I'm not sure. I think we're still on number 5. And from last meeting, it was my understanding that Emily Mason from Tripepi Smith was our communications outreach specialist, and shouldn't we hear from her as to her approach for this? And then maybe we would have some more information.
I appreciate you asking that. So I have been refraining from my comments for now, because there is an item later on the agenda. Currently, the item that we're on is really about the maps and at least getting preliminary feedback. I know you guys don't have data right now, but preliminary feedback about some potential neighborhoods or communities of interest, just to get Shalice started. That was really the intent of this item. Again, acknowledging you don't have all the data, but you kind of got to get the ball rolling somewhere, right? So that discussion does still need to take place before we move on to that next item, which is me going over the communications efforts.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions from commissioners? All right, moving on to the next agenda item. Let's see, we are on Demographer and Public Outreach Update.
So it was my understanding that the desire was for that the discussion item was to be a robust conversation about, again, those preliminary communities of interest. So I didn't really hear a lot of that conversation happening. So I wanted to pause here and ensure, is there no discussion on those items? Shalice, I don't know if you have a couple of follow-up questions or anything like that, maybe to pull some initial conversation out of the group before we kind of miss that opportunity to get the ball rolling for her with that information.
Thank you. And what we're looking for is not necessarily data driven. This is more what you know to be true about your communities. Are there certain areas that should be kept together? They share similar interests. They should be kept together. Maybe the certain appellations should be kept together, or maybe the Bohemian corridor should be kept together. I'm sure I'm not using the right terminology. These are your communities that you know, and these are the type of things that we should hear. As I mentioned, we heard 3 last time. We heard that the coastline is currently served by one district, maybe could benefit by more than one trustee area or one supervisor area touching coastline. We heard Roanoke Park is split in two. Is there a way to keep it together? We heard that that District 3 is all incorporated cities, and perhaps there's a way to have a more even distribution of incorporated and unincorporated. Are there any comments along those lines about, think about the story of your community where you live? What tells the story? Is there a neighboring community that your community aligns with and should perhaps be kept together because you have same concerns, same traffic concerns, same concerns about flooding, about fire, about growth? You know, those are the types of things that we're wanting to hear from you as commissioners. And that's one reason why this commission is so large and so well-rounded, because we want to hear from your community what you know to be true about your communities and maybe how they do and don't fit in with the existing map.
Yeah, well, thank you, Shalise. I think that's what we needed to kick us off on this discussion was, you know, some sort of primer. You know, again, you had given us the criteria that is necessary when adopting these districts. So I appreciate you giving us a little bit of a kickstart on that. Cynthia, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak from experience that there's been a debate on whether or not having a single supervisor representing a district or an area is beneficial. And having been a supervisor, I would say the most important thing is you always have to be able to count to 3 on the Board of Supervisors to get anything done. And if you have more than one supervisor representing an area, you tend to have more ability to get your voices heard. And so where I represented, there were 2 supervisors that represented the area, and it really was beneficial. So I think that we shouldn't preclude that the single supervisor option is the best option, and that more representation can be very advantageous too. And so I just wanted to put that out there as a counterpoint to someone who had said that perhaps that was the better way to go.
Thank you, Cynthia. Veronica?
Yes, thank you. So I know this is my first meeting, and so I'm being really patient in the structure and how information's flowing, but I do think that there may be, and I don't know where the place is for this, to structure this commission in a more efficient and effective way. So just putting this out there, maybe a subcommittee along community engagement would be a really good way to go. I don't think the 90 minutes or so that we're here is really centered around having community conversations. A lot of us, but I'll speak for myself, are really in tune with community engagement and getting boots on the grounds and getting information out there, but it's not going to happen through Zoom. So one, we need to figure out what is it that we're trying to do. 2, what's the best method to get that? And then maybe just reporting out in these meetings. So again, as a first meeting, I'm here and I want to be patient of the process, but I really do think we need to take a step back and see, are we set up effectively and efficiently to get the information that we need to get and to do the work that we need to do. So I don't know who I talked to about that, but I'll send an email afterwards.
Thank you, Veronica. You know, and I wish that we had the time to step back and even create that type of structure. This commission is sort of creating this as we go along. So I think that maybe a subcommittee idea, or, you know, a way that we all, or at least folks who have experience in community engagement, I think that's a great idea. The steps that we need to take to do that, I don't know how we do that either. Maybe this is a conversation with the county on this. I think we could get a lot out of that, though. You know, I'm looking for other hands raised. Any other commissioners on this? Oh, Chris Bohr, your hand is raised.
Yes, I think I'm aware that there are some data tied to census blocks that have already pre-identified disadvantaged communities, whether it's based on income or education or any variety of socioeconomic determinants. And I've seen that data, although I can't recall where I saw it. I'm wondering if that will be an input into our, as we think about the communities that we want to make sure we've been able to engage or that are somehow represented within the process.
So I can speak to that. I would encourage you to look at the tools, look at the story map and see if some of your answers have already been identified in maps there. I'm going to take a look at it. I'll give you the current demographics, as I mentioned, for the existing districts. That will give you a starting point so that you can see how the current demographics lie for the existing districts. And then also, I'll see if there are additional maps we can put on story map that will tell the story of where some of those disadvantaged communities lie, just based on the demographics that have been shown, such as household income would be likely one, perhaps language spoken at home other than English might be a good one to show for communities that may be a factor. Education level. So we can work and get some additional maps populated on the story map for you.
And then one other point, and this may be out of order for the question we're talking about, Chair, so my apologies if that's the case. But I know that we had a list for the outreach organizations tied to the 2020 census. And I think there's an opportunity to expand that list quite significantly. Where should we forward our recommendations for additional organizations to be added to that list?
Very good.
So thanks for that, Chris. Yes, I did send that as a follow-up to our first meeting, and you are welcome to send those to me and I can consolidate that list.
Thank you.
All right, Mike, Mr. Martini has his hand up.
I think, one of the issues for me at this point, and I think we don't have the data to come up with this, how drastic of changes, does this body want to recommend? I look at the requirements, the laws, the tradition, the districting. It seems to me that, our hands are somewhat tied in terms of making drastic changes, unless there are significant identifiable problems that you're trying to solve. I don't know that I know those things at this point, and I'm not sure anybody does until we go out into the community and find out, what people are saying. You talk about having two supervisors, do the coast. The logical one is District 5 and District 4. Well, now you've got two different voting cycles. And one of those things that we're not supposed to do is to have somebody lose an opportunity to vote for their supervisor. And those are the kind of outcomes that you're going to get if you start tweaking them drastically. Now, I don't know the answers. I'm hoping to find the answers. I mean, if there is a reason to do drastic, then as the county council has pointed out, you have not only the ability, but the obligation to do that. Until we know those answers, I'm not quite sure, where this body wants to go and how drastic changes in the district formation you want to go.
Thank you, Mike. Let's see, Rocio. Rocio, you still have your hand up?
Yes. I don't think I received that list of organizations that have been involved with collecting census data. I might have just missed that since coming in later.
Yes, so the newest commissioners have not seen that follow-up email because it was a follow-up to the first meeting, but I will send that over to you.
Okay, thank you.
And any data, Yvonne, that the original commissioners did receive, if we can make sure the new commissioners received all the data. Not that there was a lot, but definitely want to make sure we cover everything.
Yep.
Okay. Let's see. I don't see hands up from the commission. I want to circle back to community participants, members of the community.
So just a friendly reminder to our community members who are listening in, if you have any comments on neighborhoods, communities of interest, now, even if they're preliminary, again, no data available really at the moment, but now would be a good time for you to raise your hand and allow the commission to hear your input. And as of right now, I'm looking at our attendees list and I see no one with their hands raised.
All right. Circling back to commissioners, any additional questions, issues? Okay, let's see. We are now on item 7.
Ed, I think Socorro has her hand up.
Socorro has a hand up. Okay, I'm sorry, Socorro.
It's okay. I appreciate the idea of every member going out and kind of being an ambassador for sharing information. What I worry about is that marginalized communities would remain marginalized because proper attention has not been given to ensuring that certain voices are strategized, lifted up, like relentlessly sought out. And so and it could in many ways harm that by people with access getting even more access, and now kind of sounding like almost like they're proverbially voting twice. So I just want to kind of make sure that we talk about that with some depth and that it's organized and thoughtful and centers equity of communities we know are not involved in these conversations. Again, if this is labeled as a public input session and we've had one person, I mean, I have a level of alarm, and it's so compressed a timeline. So I don't know when we actually dig deeply into that. And I appreciate Veronica's suggestion of maybe having a subcommittee or some type of in-depth. I actually thought we were going to have that today, a real in-depth conversation about what the outreach plan is, and maybe we just haven't gotten there yet, and I keep interjecting, but knowing we're over time already, I thought that was one of our bigger issues today.
Yeah. And Socorro, I agree with you completely. The part of the election code that I think that, why we have as large, I know why we have as large of a group as we have is because, the election code is encouraging residents. It's encouraging, I'm strongly encouraging residents, including those in underrepresented communities and non-English speakers, to participate in this process. And again, this is a new process for us. This is a new process for the county. Most counties, it's a new process for them as well. I did a little bit of research on this and trying to find out, these appointed, selected commissions. There's not a lot out there because we're all sort of going at it together. But we're also going at it together in a really compressed time frame. So this is on us, so to the extent that we can, I encourage all of us, all of you, all of the public, the few who are listening, to help us out, help us reach out to underrepresented, non-English speaking, our neighbors, our neighborhoods. We know, I look at the makeup of, this commission, we know that there are people that we can reach out to for their input, and instead of outreach, I think we're going to have to do that reach out. To make this the best process as we can. I'm pushing this agenda. It's 5:45. Are there other members of the commission with questions right now? Let's see, Cynthia.
So normally in a communications plan, there's a strategy and there's messaging. I haven't heard what the message is. Why should people care about this? What does it mean to them to participate in this process? What does it mean if they don't participate? How does this affect their lives? And I think that is something that needs to get nailed down, because you get people engaged when they have something to bite into. And right now it feels really more esoteric, and it's not really well defined on the whole process. I mean, I think that there's some major digging in that needs to be done to make some sound bites to get people to be interested and show why they should make the effort. There's a lot of other things competing for their time and attention. Why is this important? And how do they get engaged in a way that's meaningful to them and that they feel like they're making an impact?
Very good point, right.
Definitely appreciate that feedback. So I think with that, did we want to go ahead and shift into the next agenda? Because I think a lot of these questions, part of them are going to be answered in this next agenda item with my presentation, but I do also know we are over the time limit. So I just wanted to defer to you, Chair Sheffield.
Sure, let's take this final question from Anna and then we'll jump right over to you, Emily. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Murray, I so deeply appreciate your point and your wisdom in this, because I think you are so correct. And also, I don't believe that the burden should be placed on commissioners to say there is no plan. Now you gotta go do it. Because the other part to that is that if we think about engagement through an equity lens, we know who we're placing the burden on. And the people we're placing the burden on will most likely be the people who also have the most restricted time in their day. So I just want to make sure that we are actually looking at this through equity. And I don't think that the solution to a lack of plan, and I'm sure there isn't, because Ms. Mason is going to give us a great overview of her plan and the plan of the county. So I just want to thank you, Commissioner Murray, and I look forward to item 6.
All right, thank you, Anna. Emily, you're up.
All right, just give me a moment here while I go ahead and share my screen. All right, so I just want to confirm that everyone can currently see my slide. Okay, I'm saying heads nod, perfect. All right, so as we know, redistricting can be a complex matter and requires really close collaboration between the county special legal counsel, a demographer, and of course, a communications firm. And engagement with the Sonoma County community is an essential part of this process. And so the following strategies and tactics selected and approved by the County Board of Supervisors will be utilized to ensure residents are educated about the redistricting process and understand how they can be involved with providing feedback and participate in both these ARC meetings, but then also the board meetings as well. But first, to ensure everyone is working from a shared understanding, I'd like to go over a few terms those of us in the communications field typically utilize when planning our efforts. So outreach is a function of making contact or connections with stakeholders outside of an organization in an effort to share information. Outreach is done for the outreacher's organization to extend its reach into a community or other group. Engagement starts with an initial outreach, but the end goal is that through repeated outreach efforts, long-lasting relationships that will be mutually beneficial for both parties can be started and or strengthened. This is a process that sometimes can take an organization years to do. Communications describes a wide array of public relations and marketing strategies and tactics that are essentially the delivery vehicle for information, information exchange, which helps to facilitate both outreach and engagement. So with this in mind, moving forward, when you hear me refer to the approach versus the approach for facilitating outreach and engagement over the next several months, you'll probably hear me refer to it as communications or the communications plan or something along those lines. So the first element of the communications plan is a dedicated redistricting webpage, which serves as the central hub for all resources and educational materials related to the redistricting process. The page has been translated into Spanish and also includes a Google Translate feature for other language translation needs. The webpage includes all information required by the Secretary of State about redistricting and provides a preview of the process in the county. Updates will be made to the webpage as needed and as the process progresses, including access to public meeting and hearing information, as well as mapping tools and draft maps. And as you heard from Shalise in the previous presentation, The various mapping tools being provided for public feedback both empower community members as well as give great insight to our demographers so they can use feedback to redraw district lines. Additionally, the various options ensure that everyone can provide feedback. So for example, for those that are not as tech savvy, they can utilize the paper maps, while others that really want to dig into some of those more tech tools, they can use District R or even the Maptitude options. So I won't dig into this too much because again, as Shalise mentioned, the mapping is really something we're going to dig deeper into, especially once we get that census data. But again, these are just really powerful tools to allow us to both educate community members, but also receive their feedback. And a total of 5 bilingual press releases will be utilized throughout this process. We had one go out a couple of weeks ago to promote not only this meeting, but the meeting following as well. And press releases can also be translated into other language utilizing the site's translation feature, as you can see on the screen there. So again, we have the English, the Spanish, and then they can be translated using the site's translation feature. And each release will be sent to a list of local media contacts and interested community members via email. They're also posted to the dedicated webpage. And press release topics include the kickoff of the redistricting process with the formation of this group, the ARC, promoting of the ARC workshop and public hearing, encouraging community members to take advantage of and use the mapping resources and tools to provide feedback, especially once that census data comes out. And then of course, the promotion of the Board of Supervisors public hearings and how individuals can participate, as well as at the very end of the process, of course, announcing when the new maps have actually been adopted and how they can be reviewed. Additionally, bilingual social media posts will be published to the county's social media platforms on a regular basis. On average, we're doing this about 1 time a week throughout the entire redistricting process. And so when we're not promoting upcoming meetings, we do have a variety of FAQs to kind of help people understand, again, what is the process? How can they get involved? Why does this matter? And additionally, we do plan on doing 2 boosted posts. So that's essentially paid advertising across Facebook and Instagram. And that will really help us reach out to community members who may not be following the county's current accounts so that the word is spread about the public hearings and of course to solicit public feedback. And just a friendly reminder that I do very much understand that not everyone is on social media, but more and more research shows that a very substantial amount of people are on social media. So I don't think you can discount this because this is a critical part to reaching out to people across, again, we're using Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, those are our main ones. And while only 4 public hearings are required as part of this redistricting process, the county has elected to host more meetings than legally required and also convenes this group, the Advisory Redistricting Commission, who will host one of those public hearings coming up in August. And through this process, ARC members essentially serve as a built-in focus group, if you will, to help guide the development of the maps. Additionally, as representatives of the community, as you discussed earlier, you're really key in helping us spread the word about redistricting efforts and encouraging constituents to get involved and to participate. And as with any public meeting or hearing, members of the community are able and encouraged to participate in all the meetings, and also Spanish translation is being offered, as you guys heard at the very beginning of this meeting. And if you look down at the very bottom of your screen, you'll see the little globe. So you'll see you can select Spanish translation. And of course, each of these meetings are promoted online, as well as with a flyer, which is posted online and also distributed to local media, to community groups, and of course, other community members via email. And flyers will also be printed and displayed on county facility counters as well. So next, community groups. And I think there's been, of course, a lot of discussion on these folks during this meeting today. So contacts that were collected during the last census outreach process, they have been emailed and called to let them know about the process, let them know that it started, encourage them to participate in the process, and also essentially ask them to become a partner with us in this process, not only to give feedback, but to help us distribute resources wherever we can. So whether that's them passing along the flyer to their constituents, or even if they have a social media account, hitting share. We've emailed and we've called, and for those that we have gotten a response from, they are kind of what we're referring to as our subscriber list. And so they are sent the materials each time as well, whenever the meeting information does go out. They will, of course, as I mentioned, be encouraged to follow the county's social media accounts and help us share posts that way. And one of the things that I do want to point out is if there's any community groups that have specific requests of the county throughout this process, those will definitely be taken into consideration and accommodated whenever feasible. And I think Yvonne may be able to speak to that a little bit later. And so I think with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Yvonne from the county, and she's going to walk us through a few more communication tactics that the county will actually be implementing on their end as part of this effort.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, so the Board of Supervisors did allocate additional funding for outreach specifically to communities that may not be on social media. I, for one, am not on social media, just full disclosure here. So we are in the process of working with Geographically Smith to put together short, like 1-minute videos that explain the redistricting process in a very easy to understand way. An additional video that will explain the tools, just kind of at a glance, like what they can be used for and why you might be interested in doing that. And those will be available in English and Spanish, and those are underway right now. So we don't have those ready, but they will be very soon. So I think that will be a good tool for those who just, not inclined to come to these meetings or read something, for example. We also are planning to do radio ads on Spanish speaking radio stations. We did that for the recruitment of the ARC, but we also intend to do that moving forward for the upcoming meetings, particularly when we have the data and we're approaching those October meetings. And so I'll be working with our communications team to outline a schedule for that. With that budget, we also have funding for boosting some of our social media posts and making sure they get a lot of exposure. And then to the degree possible, putting ads in papers. So that, again, we're trying to find ways to be not on email, not on the website per se, but, so with the use of, ads and kind of papers and also just, flyers, that kind of thing. We're trying to think of other ways to get this message out there. So, very grateful that the board did provide additional funding for this. And this is on top of already using, NDC and Geographically Smith for this effort.
So I think with that, as mentioned at the last meeting and as mentioned earlier, should any of the commission members or even members of the public that are currently listening in have specific community groups that they think would be good to reach out to, we really encourage them to send us that information, whether it's just the name of the organization. We will do research and we'll find contact information, or if you have a specific person that would be good for us to reach out to. We are more than happy to do that. Again, we went through that process previously and made phone calls to all those different organizations from the census list. And of course, I think we mentioned this before, level of interest in the redistricting process will be gauged throughout the process, and pending the feedback that we get, county staff will work with NDC and us, Geographically Smith, to determine what additional outreach steps, if any, may be needed. So I know that was kind of a lightning quick overview, but I just wanted to close by saying thank you for your feedback. Please know that we do have messaging and everything that we have established, and we do encourage, I think, again, going back to the fact that this group is a huge part of those efforts. Again, if you have contacts, please send those our way, whether that's emailing Yvonne directly, or you'll see the just the districting email up on your screen right now. You can send them there as well, and that will also get to Yvonne, and Yvonne will give those to us. So, so with that wraps up my presentation.
Great, thank you, Emily. I just have one thing to add, and it looks like the presentation generated some questions for discussion from committee members. But I'm just wondering, is it possible for us commissioners, or maybe something that can be posted on the county website, a list of the media outlets that we currently are reaching out to, or who is subscribing, that might help generate more ideas for us or members of the community to provide suggestions of who else we need to reach out to.
I think I can work with Yvonne about adding that to the website. We of course wouldn't put specific contact information, but we can put the entities. Yeah,
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you so much. Let's see, Cynthia has her hand up.
Thank you. So I have concerns about the message, and what I saw was shape the future, and I don't think that's a hook. So I'm concerned about that. And let me back up, because when I've seen polling, most people have no idea what the supervisors do. They don't understand that level of government. It's not as relatable to them. And so they don't know who their supervisor is. They don't know what their district is. And so you're sending out a message without the context of how it relates to their life. And I think that that's going to be a problem in getting people engaged. And we've seen it over and over on some of the biggest things that affect people, like the budget, like general plan, you know, zoning. It's hard to get their attention until it's down to how does it affect me and my neighborhood? And how are we going to make them feel that connection that they need to give us their feelings when it doesn't feel something that is a factor in their lives?
Thank you for that feedback. So I'll definitely take that feedback, go back and look at some of our, for example, upcoming social media posts and things like that that we have planned out. One thing I will say, I don't think we've been able to fully quite roll out everything, just because again, we're at the very beginning of this process still, but really making the point that this process directly impacts how people will vote. And our experience has shown once you kind of put that information directly in front of people, that tends to get their attention, right? Because this could potentially very much alter the way that they vote, right? So that's definitely a hook that we have found in the past that has been effective. But again, with the input that you just provided, we'll go ahead and take another look at our messaging that we currently have planned out.
Thank you, Cynthia. Judy?
Thank you, Ed. And I just wanted to ask Emily, great job on the presentation, by the way, but how many people responded to that press release by responding to the email? I'm just curious to see how big of a hill we have to climb as far as outreach. And then I also just want to reiterate what was said earlier by Commissioner Murray. I think time is of the essence, that we have a strategy, we have a clear plan of what the ask is when we go out to the communities, and let them know about what is happening, so that it's very clear what we are needing people to do.
So as far as, are you referring to how many people have emailed that redistricting email that's currently on the screen?
Yes.
I'm going to go ahead and ask Yvonne if she can speak to that.
I cannot do off the top of my head. I'll just get, can I get back to you on the number of people who responded?
Yes, I was just wondering if that was a good way to reach people or not, if we had a good response or very low response.
Sort of a gauging tool, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you just from the community organizations, I did get a good response on that email that went out. So.
Okay, thank you, Judy. Socorro?
Yeah, I was just wondering for a little more depth, what exactly is the engagement strategy? I appreciate the terminology in the beginning, and I see at least an attempt at communications, pushing out some information, but I don't know which of these slides is supposed to represent where we're engaging the public, like what we can expect that to look like.
So as I mentioned, I think engagement is something, right, that happens over time. And so we can't expect that through maybe reaching out to people for a month that we're going to all of a sudden have them fully engaged. But again, I think this is the process, right, of trying to reach out to them, make those phone calls to those community groups, trying to get them involved in the process. That is part of that engagement. I know that there's also been some talk. I've been talking to Yvonne about some other potential options. I don't know that we can necessarily daylight those right now because I don't know that those are for sure going to happen, but just know that the way that we kind of see outreach and engagement, right, is there's multiple layers. It's not just saying, okay, well, I'm going to push this flyer out to you and that's it, right? Well, that's why we went through and we made those phone calls to try to connect with them on a personal level and really get them engaged in the process. So now granted, did we reach every single person? Did every single person reply to our voicemails? No, unfortunately, that's not the case. However, I think that goes back to if you guys have any maybe specific contacts that you know would take our call or would return our call, then that is what helps us start that relationship. So any input that you guys have for community groups, I think is especially pivotal to this process.
Well, I mean, even that right there, what I don't see in writing, and I'm a visual person, so I apologize, is the clarity that you're phone calling and building relationships with community groups with the intention that they do what? Like that, again, that clarity of what this process looks like for people who have been asking to make sure we capture public input. I mean, to me, and I can tell from some of my colleagues that those details are really important and critical. Like, is someone calling in Spanish? All of those things. And for me, I actually want to know who answers the phone and who doesn't, maybe not by organization. But if you had 10 outreach groups and you can't reach any of them by phone, like, to me, that's important data for us to know in terms of how this process is going and what more we need to do. The other thing I didn't see in your presentation, and again, perhaps this is my error and assumption, but again, what centering equity looks like in your plan. And I really, Chairperson, would love to have in writing recommendations from the Office of Equity about this process. It seems too critical and important to both the supervisors, to all of us, and our, credibility and integrity. I want to make sure that we've done everything we can and that the resources in place have guided this process beyond what we know to do. And I understand it's next thinking. We're doing things people may have done in this way before, but the time is now. I mean, Here we are.
Yeah.
So with regard to tracking basically how many people or how many groups we've contacted, who's contacting us back, we can definitely gather that information. I think Yvonne could probably send that in some of the follow-up materials that she will be sending you guys. As far as some additional maybe partnership with the Office of Equity, I know, again, Yvonne has been talking with them. So I would kind of defer to Yvonne to see if she wants to maybe talk about that a little bit more, or if that's something that maybe is daylighted at the next meeting, if that's not quite come to fruition.
Well, I did speak with the Office of Equity about the redistricting effort, and also in the context of taking a step back and outside of redistricting, just generally speaking, the county's outreach effort, right? And how that is a work in progress, and it has been. And I think that's part of the reason why the Office of Equity came into fruition. And so in terms of realizing and kind of having the ideal kind of situation for outreach and getting to all corners of the community, given the timeline and all those other things we've already discussed, it may not come to complete fruition through the redistricting effort, but the attention and the need for better outreach and engagement is certainly on everybody's radar at the county, and it's not like we're trying to disregard it in any way with this process. So what I heard from the Office of Equity is that it's a larger kind of systemic thing that needs to kind of get moving, and we're doing it in certain ways, but we're not going to be perfection yet. So
okay, y'all, I'm going to do a time check. We're about 40 minutes over. I see some hands from commissioners up, and I also saw a question that came from Peter Rumble about additional meetings that we as commissioners can have. It was also proposed that maybe there is a subgroup of commissioners those who have interest and expertise to add in the process. Yvonne, I don't know if that's something that we can build in. Can we build in additional meetings? Or is there anything setting us to this timeline of meetings of commissioners?
I would say the meetings that have been outlined on the website for the public out there, we should, if we're going to meet again, it should be in addition to those meetings. And
Absolutely,
not those meetings.
absolutely. I would not suggest we change any of that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Again, it's 10 after 6. I see 3 commissioner hands up, and we also want to go to the public on this. Rocio, if you can be brief.
Sure. So I wanted to ask if we could receive all the materials, like a toolkit of all the flyers and all the videos as well, or if it's going to be publicly put in a box. Can we know where that is?
Yes. Yes, the flyers are what we have available is on the website right now, and the videos are under production right now. We don't have those available.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, but I will send you the follow-up email from the previous meeting.
Great, thank you.
As well as the new commissioners.
Okay, and Veronica. Thank you, Rocio. Veronica.
Yes, thank you. Really briefly. So I think 2 things that are moving us forward. One thing is, who's the point of contact for individuals, whether it's community members, whether it's organizations. I think that has to be very clear. You know, where do their comments go to? Where do their questions? And hopefully it's a very diverse, multiple language ability. The other one is I would strongly consider having like a community relations role added, and whether that's, you know, someone that unfortunately has to add that to the role within the county, but it's really important to make sure that there's a better streamlining of the information. And as we get to community input, we're going to need those type of roles to really get the information to this group, to the Board of Supervisors, and so forth. So I'll leave it there because yes, it's getting late.
So real quick, I just wanted to mention, so this redistricting email that you see, this is where everything, whether it's someone submitting a draft map or if it's a member of the public who has a suggestion for a community group, I would recommend they email that address. And even commission members here, if you want to email that address as well, rather than emailing Yvonne, either way, that email does go to Yvonne. But I think for members of the public, literally any feedback, any resource, any questions that they have should all be directed at that email address that's currently on the screen.
Is there a phone number and a person as well?
I believe that there is a phone number on the website, if I remember correctly, Yvonne.
And they're bilingual?
I will have to defer to Yvonne on that.
Yeah, I do not, I need to double check the number, but there is a number on that website. And
Yeah,
whether it's bilingual or not is a question.
Yeah, person contact is going to be key, I think, besides just an email.
All right, thank you, Veronica. Last question from Ana Lugo.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually deeply concerned about this communications plan. Yvonne, I'd love to figure out, and since we are designing this, I think that we do get the right to ask for this. I would love to figure out who our local consultant for engagement is and how that can be done, because I think we need engagement we don't have, communities haven't consistently engaged. There are organizations who are doing engagement. There are individuals who do engagement. We're not starting at ground zero. There are tools in place, entities in place to do it. And maybe what it takes is a local engagement consultant. And so I would love to hear what the plan for that could be. I also asked for what about this is culturally responsive. We did not get an answer to that today. I would love to hear an answer to that next time. This, if we truly are saying that engagement and getting public participation is the single most critical role that we as an entity can play in making sure that these maps reflect the wishes of community, then engagement has to be the single most important piece of this work. And yes, engagement has been happening in this community for many years. There are many ways in which we can plug into ongoing engagement efforts that are happening right now. There are in fact many engagement efforts happening right now. And if we actually engage with the Office of Equity, and if we actually asked them and had them present to us what is happening in the community, then maybe we would have a better idea of what's happening and how we can plug into that. I will not accept that it will be put on the backs of community on these commissioners to then go and engage with the communities. I think that we have a critical role to play in that. And I think that it's our job also to do that, but it is not solely our job. And so if one of our goals is to make sure that disenfranchised communities and marginalized and communities historically marginalized get to have a voice, then it is also the job of the county to resource that. And so I'm not only putting it on your shoulders, Yvonne. I know that you have a lot and I truly appreciate you and all the work you do. And this is a bigger conversation. And so to then rush us through this conversation, I don't think is acceptable. I just want to make sure that if we truly are saying community input is important, that we're giving it its due time and that we're making sure that we're focusing on communities that have been marginalized. There are groups working with communities of diverse backgrounds. I'd love to hear Commissioner Lang is the vice president of the NAACP. I'd love to hear if she was outreach to, if she got a phone call. I'd love to hear what other groups got a phone call who work with marginalized communities. So I think that if we're really are gonna talk the talk, then we really need to walk the walk. And I don't actually care how fast we have to move. We actually have to do the work and we have to actually mean what we say. And so last time we were told that we were doing engagement and today we were told we're actually just doing communications. I don't know anybody who reads press releases other than me. So I'd love to also understand based on what data these tactics are happening. So I know that there are reports that say how we can best engage and communicate with communities, especially the Latinx community. There was a whole report done. So I'd love to actually get some people who understand engagement here and to get an actual presentation about how we're going to do this. And if it takes going to the supervisors, I'm happy to go to the supervisors and ask for it. But we need to actually get serious about this. It can't be an afterthought. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Well said.
Can I just real quick give a quick response to that? So I think there's a couple of things here. I think one, the strategies and tactics that you did see currently, I just want to remind everyone, outreach can lead to engagement, and that's done via communications channels. And I understand there are certain firms that do specialize specifically in going to those groups. I think one of the things that we're asking from this group is if that list that Yvonne sends you is missing a community group that you know who is doing that we can work with, then please, we invite you to send us that information. As of right now, Yvonne, please let me know if I am mistaken. I don't think we've received any suggestions for community groups yet to date, but again, we welcome that. And again, going back to, we are happy to work with individual community groups based on their individual character and their constituents, but we need to be able to, if we're missing groups, we need to be sent that information so that we know what we don't know, if that makes sense. So I just, and again, I think this goes back to, Yvonne has been talking with the Office of Equity. There are some other things in the works. So I would just ask that everyone be patient and then also provide some of the feedback that we are asking for and work with us throughout this process. So thank you.
Yvonne, I just want you to hear me when I say this engagement requires a plan, and I want to see a plan. And engagement requires that people understand their local jurisdictions. And I would love for us to actually respect local individuals who do this work and to actually engage them. I also spoke to the Office of Equity and they are open to a conversation. So I just want you to hear me when I say this cannot be done piece by piece. Send me an organization here, send me an organization there. There needs to be an actual engagement plan. I fully understand outreach and engagement, hence why I brought it up last time. And I want to see it, because if we really want to be serious about centering communities that have been historically marginalized, then we actually have to do the work. Thank you, Yvonne.
Thanks for the comment. I just, would like to just say that, these meetings that we have with the public, we want to focus it on redistricting and mapping information. But yes, the engagement thing, we can have us, I think, maybe dedicate separate time for that. It is an important part of this process. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go to the community for public comment. It is 20 after 6.
Just give me one moment. I am double checking our list here. And for those individuals that are currently on, none of the attendees have their hands up, so I do not believe they have a comment.
Great. All right. Because it is also an agenda item, I had requested that we have public comment on matters not on the agenda. So if there are folks participating from the public who have comments to make to this committee that is not on this agenda, they could speak now.
No hands have been raised at this time.
Great, we're good. All right, moving on. Proposed agenda item, agenda topics for upcoming meetings. I see Socorro.
May we please have community engagement as a standing item so we're sure to get clear updates on what's happening and what both kind of where we are in terms of what we've received in the synthesis. But I'd like to be clear and it be very public and transparent, kind of how this is going and what we're doing when we need to tweak, modify, or readjust.
I think that's a very good idea. Maybe this would just be a report back item. Okay. Other commissioners? I see Rocio.
Yeah, so I heard from Socorro earlier, the equity. So putting that on the agenda and then completely supporting Ana Lugo and what she has said. So also the communication strategy as well.
All right.
Oh, one other thing. Kind of I guess a point of process or question of process, but how will this conversation be about scheduling those additional meetings?
So that's a good question, Rocio. I have to think about that and get back to you since it's a newly developed item, but yes, I will be in touch.
Thank you, Rocio. Let's see, Cynthia.
On following up and agree about having standing agenda item on engagement and equity, how do we measure success? I'd like to see, are we able to collect any metrics about what's working, what's not working, so we can tweak it? And so is there some way in the agenda items that will be added that we can see, did we get a lot of clicks or people showing up or sending email, whatever it is? I think it's always good to determine success and then we can see if we're hitting our mark. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Cynthia. Judy.
Hi, thank you again. I would just like to suggest we put the community engagement topic earlier on the agenda because I think that would really expedite the meeting quite a bit. Thank you.
All right.
I have just one more thought, which is we had scheduled our meetings to be 90 minutes and the first one was 2 hours. This one's longer, even longer. So perhaps to be more realistic for the next meeting, at least schedule 2 hours for that.
Okay, that sounds great. And commissioners, we know that again we're running against the clock on this. I do like the proposal, and hopefully there'll be we'll see how the county receives approval for additional meetings. I think that might be a great idea. We have upcoming meetings, August 23rd, a public hearing. And we also have October 5th, Board of Supervisors hearing. And hopefully we can get a lot more information that was requested from commissioners tonight. We have a whole lot to process. Yvonne and staff, I want to thank you. Emily, I want to thank you. Shalice, also thank you. Spanish translation, thank you. I'm just, and all you commissioners as well. This is a huge commitment, and it is time consuming, as we can tell. I'm here in a hotel room in Legoland right now. So we're all putting in the time, and I just really appreciate all the work that we do. I'm just going to circle back one more time for commissioners if they have any questions, any last things that they'd like to see. Karen, I see your hand up.
Thank you. I was wondering if at the beginning of the agenda, we could have an item for commissioners' reports or comments. So like I had the comments at the beginning of the meeting, I didn't quite know where to put it. So
no, I think that's a great
Just an
idea.
idea.
We also want to have room where we can report out if we have had any interface interaction with the community. So that should definitely be an agenda item. Very good.
Thank
you. Let's see, Chris.
I'm wondering, given our very robust and constructive conversation around engagement, if there might be an opportunity to create a subcommittee among some of the commissioners here to partner with Emily, Yvonne, and Shalice and work out some of the details expected around engagement, do that kind of as a supercharged way, and then bring that back to the commission. That might be an expedient way to kind of crack that nut.
Very good. All right. Other commissioners? Going once, going twice? Well, again, thank you so much for your time. Yvonne, I think you'll be providing us with updates via email on everything discussed tonight, maybe a summary. And again, just appreciate all your time commitment, commissioners, and all your expertise. And I guess that is it. We'll call the meeting. Good night, everyone.
Thanks, Ed.